Today we're working on a 2014 E250 and I'm going to show you how you can replace the brake pads quite easily at home. The first thing you'll want to do is put a wheel chock under the opposite side that you'll be jacking from. So we have a wheel chock underneath the passenger side since we're doing the driver's side right now. The next thing that you're going to do is jack up the car. With the car jacked up, you're going to check the wheel bearings to see how much play there is in there right now. So I'm going to go left to right and up and down to see if there's any play. So I have a very small amount of play as I go up and down. So when I take this wheel off, I'm also going to show you guys how to adjust this wheel bearing. The next thing you'll do is get this wheel off. So you'll grab your cover and you'll just peel it back. Set that to the side and don't break it. Next you'll have to remove your lugs. These are 22 millimeter. Next, you will remove your wheel. Sometimes requires a kick. Now what I do is I set the tire and wheel so I can use it as a seat. Spin it over and I listen for any bearing growl. I don't hear any of that, I just hear the brake pad contacting. The surface of the rotor looks really good, so we're going to go ahead and just replace the pads. The next thing that I do is I grab a screwdriver and I go between the pad and the rotor and I decompress. So to show you guys what I'm doing, I come over to this side so you can see your piston, your pad, and your rotor. And what I'm doing right now is I'm prying between the piston and the pad. So now I have the screwdriver between the pad and the rotor and I'm decompressing the piston. And I'm doing that on either side. You're going to do that slowly. Now the next thing to do is to grab the piston itself and move it in and out. You want to make sure that this slides very nicely, very freely, because if it doesn't, that means your slide pins, which one's located here and the other is down here, your slide pins could need to be replaced. Now we're going to go ahead and lubricate these since we'll have it off, but that's all we're going to have to do on this job. So I know this is not the best angle, but what we're going to do is going to remove this bolt and we're going to hold on to this little nut right here, this flange. So we're going to have a crescent wrench, we're going to have a 6-point socket and we're going to have a wrench right here, and we're going to go ahead and break these two loose. Alright, I have my 17 millimeter wrench, my 13 millimeter socket. I'm going to go ahead and break this loose. And that came off very nice and easy. What I'm going to go ahead and do is just thread this in just a little bit so that it holds the caliper in place. I'm going to go to the bottom side, which looks just like the top, and do the exact same thing. Now I've completely removed the bottom. Now I'm going to remove the top while I'm holding on to the caliper assembly. And it's got some Loctite on there, so we'll put that back on. The next thing I'll do is just flip this over and move it onto the top of the brake assembly, and I will take off my brake pads. Alright guys, so I took my outer brake pad off and I'm very shocked to see that there was no hardware holding this guy in. These guys were just kind of sitting in there like so, which is missing its anti-rattle clips. So the next thing we'll do is we'll just pry this side off. And you'll see that this thing was super low. Really got lucky that we caught it in time. Now what's interesting is that this outside didn't have any hardware from the last person who did this job, but the inside does have hardware. So we have new hardware, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove these little clips, these little anti-rattle clips. Because we are going to replace these. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a little wire brush and some brake parts cleaner, and we're just going to go ahead and clean these surfaces off so that there's no rust or brake dust in between our new hardware and the caliper mounting bracket itself. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to just clear this off. We're going to remove our slide pins or caliper slide pins, and we're just going to shove some goop on them and reinstall them. This will make sure that they give us a nice long service life and they don't jam up on us. This is a step a lot of people skip. Don't skip it. It's really easy to do, and it will save you a headache in the future for sure. And all you have to do is just pull it off, liberally apply some lube on it, put it back into your hole, move it in and out a couple times to get it all, you know, smeared around, and make sure that your rubber boots haven't snapped or cracked and are ready to rock and roll. Now you'll want to clean your hands really well because you'll want to make sure that your hands are very clean because you don't want to get any sort of lubrication of any sort onto the surface of the rotor. So the next thing we'll do is we will install our hardware. Now our hardware has one little clip here and then one clip here, and it goes on just like such. This little knob goes towards the rotor, and then you just press in until it clips in, and you'll hear it clip in, and you'll give it a little tug and it'll be nice and snug. So that's what you want to do there. So we'll go to the next one and we'll do the same thing. Come with a little tab towards the rotor, come up, in, and you just crunch it in there. This is why we clean this out, so that we wouldn't be fighting any other sort of rust or brake dust that's getting in between these and the pad themselves. Now we'll do the back side the same exact way. Just go ahead, and you can't see that angle, but just, you know, doing the same thing. Give it a nice little tap. Make sure it's fully seated. And I'll go ahead and grab this side, and I'm just pressing it up and in. Nothing special, okay? Now, what I do is I take this little overflow here, just this little tiny dab, and I just kind of rub it on any surface that's going to be metal to metal. And what that does is it just kind of helps the pad slide around. And I like that. I like that idea. Now we'll go ahead, we'll install our new pads, and you can see these pads were totally toast. That's the new pad, that's the old pad. So totally got every single ounce of service life out of these guys. And now we'll go ahead and just install them. Alrighty, so we have those rears on there. So we've got the rear on there. Now we're going to slide the front on there. I'm going to use my little cheater assistant here to help me get the pad in place. And just tap it in, and I'm just going to tap this one in. So now we've got both of our brake pads in. What we'll have to do is we'll probably have to compress the pistons a little bit more, and this is why we were trying to compress them earlier. So now what I'll do is go ahead and compress these pistons all the way, and you can do this with either a caliper piston press or just a large pair of channel locks. So what I have set up here is my caliper piston press, and all you do is you just turn this in and it will compress the piston into the caliper. Now this is a dual piston, so what's going to end up happening is if I do this too quickly, it's going to press out the other piston. That other cylinder is going to fill with fluid because I'm displacing it right now. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll crush this one all the way in, and then I'll go to the other one and I'll do it slowly. And and I'll do it slowly. If I do it slow enough, I'll get lucky and it won't pop back out. So we've got this guy all the way compressed because we need it to be all the way compressed. This is a really handy tool, and I'll say this is going to be the hardest part of this entire job. The hardest part of this entire brake job is going to be crushing these pistons back into a position so that you can go ahead and put it back on with the new pads on. So now I'll go to the other side and I'll do the exact same thing I just did on this side. Now I'm just compressing it in, and I'm going to hold my thumb on the other one. I'm not going to be able to beat the laws of hydraulics here, but if I just put a little bit of tension on this other piston while I'm collapsing the upper piston, it'll slowly kind of help me out a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep turning this nice and slowly so that it compresses very nicely. I don't have any drama from it. And then I can go ahead and throw this caliper back on. So now that's nice and tight, which means I'm all the way down, and I'll get my tool out of there. And with my tool out of there, I can now go ahead and put everything back together. So now I'm going to put everything back together. What I do is I just grab my caliper and I slip it back on over top of my new pads. I'm going to have to decompress the slide pins because the slide pins are full of grease and they extend out. So I just decompress that a little bit. I'll do the same thing on the bottom. And now I'm on. So I'll give it a couple little love taps. She goes right on. Now you'll want to make sure that you put a little bit of blue Loctite onto these threads for the bolts that are going back in, which hold the caliper in place. So we've already given them a little bit of blue Loctite. And we're just going to go ahead and thread these guys back in. What I always do is I always start threading anything by hand, because this is when you make your mistake that's going to cost you your day. Because if you were to try to put this in and you cross thread it just a little bit, just a small amount, you're going to ruin your day and you're going to be having to buy new caliper hardware stuff, going back to the parts store, all that fun jazz. So I got that on. Now I'll go ahead and just snug these up, and then I'll torque them down. 17mm wrench, very handy. Holds that guy in place. I'll go to the bottom one and do the same thing. So now that we have that complete, the next thing to do is to put the wheel back on the car, and we're going to play around with these wheel bearings here. We're going to snug them up a little bit because there's just a little bit of wheel bearing play, and that's normal for this car, because when you have to take the brakes off this van, you actually have to take off the wheel bearings, because the wheel bearings are actually what's holding on this rotor assembly. So we're going to go ahead and just knock this little cap off, and then we'll go ahead and tighten it up a little bit, spin it around, and make sure everything's happy. Now we have no left to right play. The suspension's nice and tight, but we have this really small play up and down, and it has a small little knock to it. I'm going to do it a couple times, see if you can't hear it. I don't think it's going to be audible, there's too much noise here. But there's just a little bit of play, you can feel it in and out, and that is your bearings. Now if you've ever adjusted trailer bearings, it's a very similar process. I'm going to do my best to get this cap off with my rubber mallet. If I can't, I'll have to go to the metal mallet, but I run the risk of damaging this bearing cap. So it's not coming loose with this. I'm just going to tap this little metal guy. There we go. She's coming out now. Alright, so the good news is that's new grease. It smells good, and I can tell that this is a new cotter pin and that's a new castle keeper nut. Now what we're going to do is we're going to remove this cotter pin, replace the cotter pin, and then we're going to snug this nut up just a little bit so that we can get rid of that little bit of play that we're hearing in that bearing. So now I'm going to show you how to adjust the wheel bearing. And what you'll do is you'll notice if I go up and down and I wiggle it, you'll hear this light knocking. And you know it's the wheel bearing because it happens no matter what direction you're pushing it in. So what we'll do is we'll grab a small little metal hammer and we're going to go on this lip right here and we're going to tap the wheel bearing cover off. Now, this is a new wheel bearing. Someone else had installed this, but what you do is you grab the cotter pin and you remove it. So we're just going to bend the tabs of the cotter pin up. And this is a nice new cotter pin, nice, easy to work with, malleable. And then we're just going to grab the bottom and pull it through. Okay, this is your little castle washer, and that just comes off. How that works is it goes onto the nut with any of these 12 points, and then the cotter pin keeps this from falling completely off. Now what I do is I give it a good cranking so that it's nice and snug, and then I come off a little bit. Then what I do is I jiggle the wheel up and down and I try to see if there's any play. I got a little bit of play, so I just snug it up just a little bit. I have no play there, so I'm going to just snug it just a tiny bit more, and that's where I'm going to leave it now. So I'll go ahead and reinstall my little keeper, and now it fits. We'll go ahead and take our cotter pin and put your cotter pin right back in. If you have a new cotter pin, that's even better. And then we'll just bend the tabs so that it does not come off. Then you just grab your cap, put your cap back on, take a rubber mallet, spin it, tap it back in. Now grab the wheel again and shake it, and you should have absolutely no wobble, no play, nothing. And when you spin it, it should spin nice and freely. And there you have it. Now go into the car and depress the brake pedal so that the pistons fill back up with fluid and that you'll have good brake. You'll do the same thing on the other side of the car, and then you have it. So that's all you have to do your brakes. So we've just completed replacing the front brake pads on this 2014 E250. But one thing that I want to go back over is how to adjust your wheel bearings. On this vehicle, when you're doing the front brakes, you'll want to check your wheel bearings with the car jacked up. You'll go ahead and shake the wheel in all sorts of different directions, but most importantly, you'll want to do your top to bottom. If you feel something in your top to bottom and you feel something in your side to side, no matter what different position you're going into, you feel something going on, you need to adjust your wheel bearings.